YouTube, it's me, Bergie, and I'm here with my video on all of the books I read in 2018. Before I get into the actual books, I just wanted to say that I will be giving the title, the author name, my rating, and a quick blurb about my thoughts on the book. And if you want more information on them, let me know down in the comments and I will try to do a review, a sole review on whatever books you guys want to know my thoughts on. So yes, let's just get into the books. So I started off 2018 reading Undeniable: Evolution and the Science of Creation by Bill Nye. I gave this a B- because I thought it was interesting, but it gave me some anxiety because it talked about death and I'm kind of afraid of death. Next, I read The Last Olympian by Rick Riordan. I gave it an A+, and I reread it. This is the 5th book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, and I loved it, obviously. I've reread this so many times. So then I followed up by reading The Lost Hero by Rick Riordan. Again, A-. It's the Heroes of Olympus Book 1. Again, it's a reread. Not a fan of the new characters, but I still loved this book. The Son of Neptune by Rick Riordan. A. The Heroes of Olympus Book 2. It's again a reread. I like this slightly better than the first book. Then I read The Conspiracy of Us by Maggie Hall. I gave this a B-. I thought it was a cheesy YA version of Dan Brown's Robert Langdon series because it had conspiracies in it, but I still found it very enjoyable. The Mark of Athena by Rick Riordan, A+. It's Heroes of Olympus Book 3, again a reread, and I think this is my second favorite book in the series, so of course I loved it. Then I read The House of Hades by Rick Riordan, A+. The Heroes of Olympus Book 4, it was again a reread. This is my favorite in the series because it is just awesome. Then I finished it up with The Blood of Olympus by Rick Riordan, A+, Book 5, and final book, again a reread. It's a great book, but I will admit that the battles at the end are a little lacking, but still great. And then I read School for Psychics by Casey Archer. I gave it a B. This is an ARC I had to read for my local ARC book club. It was an interesting paranormal fantasy detective novel, though I had issues with pacing and the characters. Then I read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. I gave it a B+. It was a funny, witty, classic science fiction novel that I quite enjoyed. Then I continued with the second book in that series, The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. I gave it a B. It continues to be funny and witty, but it was hard for me to visualize what was going on. Then I picked up The Sword of Summer by Rick Riordan. I gave it a B+. This is the first book in his Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard series. It was again a reread. I enjoyed it more this time around than I did the first time. Then I picked up The Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I gave it a C. This is book 1 in the Throne of Glass series. I found it interesting, but nothing special. I then read the second book, which is Crown of Midnight. I gave it a C-. It was okay. Then I picked up The Hammer of Thor by Rick Riordan. This is book 2 in the Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard series. I gave it a B+. Admittedly, I forgot what had happened after my first read of it, but really enjoyed it, and oh my god, that ending. I forgot what had happened, obviously, and then that ending just was great. Then I read Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. This is her third book in the Throne of Glass series. Gave it a C- because I'm not liking this series very much, or not nearly as much as her Court of Thorns and Roses series, but might continue on with it. Don't know. So then I read Princess in Waiting by Meg Cabot. This is book 4 in her Princess Diaries series. I gave it an A. This is just a fun, guilty pleasure, quick read for me. So then I continued with book 5, which is Princess in Pink. Gave it an A. I read book 6, which is Princess in Training. Again, A. And Party Princess by Meg Cabot, A-, which is book 7. In this book, I was kind of annoyed by Mia, but still enjoyed it. And honestly, they're all guilty pleasure, quick, enjoyable reads for me. So then I picked up Obsidio by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is book 3, the final book in the Illuminae files. I gave it an A+. This was an intense ending to a great series, so I really recommend this series. Then I picked up A Great and Terrible Beauty by Libba Bray. I gave it a B+. It was slow to get into at first, but once I did get into it, I really enjoyed it. Then I read Still Lives. I don't know exactly. For some reason, I can't get the title right. I'm guessing it's Still Lives. But anyway, it's by Maria Hummel. This is an ARC I had to read again, and I gave it a B-. I'm not usually a fan of thrillers, but I really enjoyed this one. Next, I picked up The Ship of the Dead by Rick Riordan. This is the third and final book in his Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard series. I give it an A. This was a great ending to the series, and just as a note, Rick Riordan is a genius at interweaving events from different stories that he's creating, especially like within his different like myths, not necessarily all within the same myth base, you know what I mean? But anyway, while I was writing my notes for this, I realized that he had made a reference in this book to a book that he published later on that was just like a mind-blowing moment, and it just blew my mind all over again because he does that for me. Then I picked up A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. I gave it a C. I was quite disappointed in this book as it was not as good as I was expecting. Then I read Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I gave it a B. It's the first book in the Farseer trilogy, which is part of her Realm of the Elderling universe. I thought it was quite slow to start, but definitely picked up towards the end, and I did enjoy it. Then I read Utopia by Thomas More. I gave it a B. It was interesting to read, especially because of my fascination with dystopia. It's not really a utopian world, but more so a discussion on what would make a world utopian. Next, I picked up Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuval. This is book 1 in the Themis Files, and I gave it a B+. I flew through this novel, like literally flew through it, because I really just enjoyed everything about it. And because of that, I picked up the second book in the series, which is Waking Gods. I gave it a B+ as well. I likewise just flew through it and loved it. Then I picked up The Hidden Oracle by Rick Riordan. This is book 1 in his Trials of Apollo series, and I gave it an A. This was, again, a reread, and I really, really enjoyed it, but mostly because we were revisiting past characters and past scenes, or settings, I should say. Then I picked up the second book in the Trials of Apollo series, which is called The Dark Prophecy. Again, this was a reread, and so far this is my least favorite in this series, but it was still a great book. Then I picked up Darius the Great Is Not Okay by Adib Khorram. Again, this was an arc that I had to read for my book club, and I gave it a B+. I am not a huge fan of contemporaries, but I really, really enjoy this because of the culture rep, mental health, portrayal, family relationship issues, and friendships that were all within this book. Then I picked up the third and most recent published novel in the Trials of Apollo series, which is called The Burning Maze. I gave this an A+ because of one scene, really, in this book, because it's so amazing after having read, 20 of Rick Riordan's books, that he can still shock me and continue to make me obsessed with his writing. So honestly, I just loved it. Then I picked up Only Human by Sylvain Neuval. This is the third and final book in his Themis Files series, and I gave it an A+. I really became obsessed with this series, and I really enjoyed reading it, so I really have nothing bad to say. I really do recommend it. Then I picked up Bellwether by Susanna Kearsley. This was another arc that I had gotten for my book club, and I gave it a B. I read this really at the perfect time because the book mirrored the internship I was working at. I really need to read more historical fiction novels because this was just great, and I need to find more other great historical fiction novels. Then I read a complete series. I read The Raven Boys, The Dream Thieves, Blue Lily, Lily Blue, and The Raven Kings by Maggie Stiefvater. The Raven Boys I gave a B. I thought, and this was also a reread, I had read this in 2017, but in order to read the other books I kind of had to refresh myself. So with The Raven Boys, I found it an interesting concept, but it was not as great as I had hoped, and I did give it a B. Then for The Dream Thieves, I gave a B-, same thing. Blue Lily, Lily Blue, I gave a B-, again, same. And then for The Raven Kings, I gave a B. And to be honest, I think I would lower all the ratings of these books because I was quite disappointed with the plot and the writing style, so I think I was a little too generous with giving them a whole bunch of B ratings. So then I picked up Dear Ijawele, or Feminist Manifesto in 15 Suggestions by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I gave it a B. I thought it was a good introduction to the topic of feminism, and I agreed with a lot of her points. Then I picked up Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb, which is book 2 in the Farseer trilogy, and I give it a B+. I really enjoy Hobbs' ability to craft the world and to craft intriguing characters, and I just loved her writing style as well, so I really love everything about Robin Hobb and her books. Then I picked up Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I gave this a C. I was really disappointed because this is literally just a bloodier Roman inspired space without much space version of the Hunger Games, and I just don't understand why everybody raves about this book. Then I picked up The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I gave this a B-. It was slow to start, and I wish there was more original scenes with Patroclus and Achilles instead of just a retelling of the Iliad, but I really enjoyed the writing and the characterization, so I did think it was good overall. Then I picked up The Philosopher's Flight by Tom Miller. I gave this a B-. Again, it was slow to get into, but I really enjoyed the magic system and how it slightly alters history. Then I read Princess on the Brink by Meg Cabot. This is book 8 in the Princess Diaries. I give it an A, still enjoying the series. Then I continued with book 9, which was Princess Mia. I gave it an A. Ditto again. They're just guilty pleasure reads for me. Next, I read Mortal Engines by Philip Reeves. I gave this a C+. Although I will say it's kind of hard to judge this book on its own. I feel like I need to read the other books in the series before I make a definitive decision on how I rate them. I then read A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. I gave this a B+ because I thought it was a good nonfiction read, though it was quite depressing. Also, money is the root of all problems is what I learned from this book. Not race or religion, money is the root of all problems. Then I went back to the Princess Diaries by reading book 10, which is Forever Princess. A+, I really loved this book and I love the series. Then I picked up Royal Wedding by Meg Cabot. Again, this is an A+. I thought it was a great end to the series, but I just want more. I don't want to ever stop reading about Princess Mia. Then I picked up Scythe by Neal Shusterman. I gave it a B. I really enjoyed this take on a dystopia. I found it really unique. And I read a lot of dystopian novels, so for me to say that, it means a lot, I feel like. Then I read Ink and Bone by Rachel Caine. I gave it a C. It's definitely a wannabe dystopian version of Harry Potter and the Hunger Games that had an interesting concept, but I did not think it was executed very well. I then picked up Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking by Susan Cain. I gave this a B-. It was great to find a book that explains my personality and how I feel, but I wanted something more. I just don't know what. I then read The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw. I gave it a B-. It was predictable and cheesy, but I still enjoyed it and especially like the atmosphere of it. Then I picked up the second book in the Arc of the Scythe series by Neal Shusterman, which is Thunderhead. And all I have to say really, oh well I guess I should say it's an A-, but oh my god, that cliffhanger ruined me. I need the third book now. Like right now. Then I picked up To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. I gave this a B-. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was adorable and it just made me smile, so I really just liked it. Then I read Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I gave this a B-. It had a slow start, but eventually I just loved the drama that was unfolding in it. I then picked up A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I gave it a D. I did not enjoy anything about this book. Nothing. Then I read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I gave it a B+. I think this is my favorite book by her that I've read so far. Then I picked up The Dark is Rising by Susan Cooper. I gave it a C. Again, same thing as with Mortal Engines. I don't feel confident rating this book until I read the other books in the series. But another issue I had was I couldn't really picture what was happening, so that kind of was why I didn't love it as much as I was hoping to. Then I read Woman in Power, A Manifesto by Mary Beard. I gave it a C-. I didn't really like how she connected the ancient myths and stuff and points that she was making to the modern stuff, so I just didn't really mesh well with the book at all. Then I read Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. Again, I just wanted to read all of her books this year apparently. I gave it a B-. I really felt like I had read this book before because there was especially one scene that was very vaguely familiar, but I don't know. I did enjoy it though. Then I read The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. I gave it a C+. I found it to be an interesting and unique addition to the science fiction fantasy genre, even though it was slow to get into the twist at the end, well, not at the end, but there's a twist in there, and I found it to be a great twist. Then I read A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas. This is kind of the novella following the Court of Thorns and Roses series. I gave it a C-. It was fun to read, but doesn't really add much to the series. Then I read The Women's War by Jenna Glass. This is another arc I had to read for my book club. I gave it a B. It was a slow building of the world, but it turned into a really gripping feminist fantasy novel that I really enjoyed. I think it's coming out in March. So I might do a review on this because I really, really enjoyed this book and I can't wait to see where it's going. Then I read Emma by Jane Austen. I gave this a B-, and really all I have to say is that I enjoyed the drama that was portrayed. Then I picked up Erusha and the End of Time by Roshni Chokshi. I gave this a C+. It was nice to learn about the Hindu mythology, and while I understand the myths of Hindu and really any myths in the world are really similar to Greek mythology, and because of that there would expectedly be some similarities to the Percy Jackson series. I feel like there still should have been some difference, particularly I think that Roshni Chokshi, oh my god, I can't say that. I can say it in my head perfectly fine, but once it gets to my mouth, I can't say it. I think that Roshni Chokshi should have chosen maybe some myths that are differing than the ones that are included in the first Percy Jackson and the Olympians book, because I found it way too similar to The Lightning Thief. But I still enjoyed it and I do plan on continuing with the series. Then I read Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. I gave this a B+. People were saying that this is a standalone, but it's not. I checked on Goodreads and I have to wait until 2020 to continue with this series, and I'm kind of pissed off about it because I love this book so much. So thank you for everybody who recommends his standalones, saying that this is one of his standalones. To start with, you lied, and I'm angry because now I have to wait till 2020. I know it's only a year away now, but still, I have to wait until 2020. Anyway, I then picked up Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. I gave this a C+. I'm not a fan of domestic thrillers, but oh my god, that twist halfway through the book, that got me and it made me enjoy it a little bit more than I was thinking I would enjoy it before that part. Then I picked up Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I gave it a B-. I was expecting to enjoy this more because it is supposed to be a commentary on Gothic literature, but I didn't like it as much, and I still thought it was good though. So then I picked up Scorch Atlas by Blake Butler. I gave it a D-. What the hell is this book? That's all I have to say. Then I read The Secret Adversary by Agatha Christie. I gave this a B. I really enjoy this mystery novel, and I can quickly see myself becoming immersed by Agatha Christie's and obsessed, I guess, by her writings. I then read Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. I gave this a B-. Don't get me wrong, this is a good fantasy novel, but it wasn't as great as I was expecting / hoping, so that's why it's not as high. Then I read Salem's Lot by Stephen King. I gave it a B. I really psyched myself out thinking it would be scarier, but I really enjoyed it as it had like the perfect amount of creepiness and not outright horror, at least not for me. Then I read The Last 8 by Laura Pohl. This was another arc that I had to read for my book club. I gave it a D+. I thought it would be what I was hoping the Fifth Wave series would be, but nope, it just was worse than that series. Then I picked up Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. I gave it a B. I really enjoyed all aspects of this book, and I can see myself really auto-reading anything that Jay Kristoff writes. Then I read Chasing Shadows by Tom DeLonge and A.J. Hartley. This is book 1 of his Secret Machines series, and I gave it an A-. I was really surprised with how much I enjoyed this, and it really has the same feel, I think, as the Robert Langdon series by Dan Brown, which is like one of my favorite adult series of all time. So if it's comparable to that, you know it's good. I then read A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. This is of course the first book in his Song of Ice and Fire series. I gave it a B. Even though not a ton of eventful things happened, I still really enjoyed following all of the characters that we follow in the book. I then read The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs, A New History of a Lost World by Steve Bruzette. I gave it a B-. It didn't really add anything to my knowledge of dinosaurs, but it was still fascinating to read a complete history of the time of the dinosaurs. Then I read The Cuckoo's Calling by Robert Galbraith, aka J.K. Rowling. I gave it a B. I really enjoyed this mystery, even though there were minor issues with stereotypes. Then I read Armada by Ernest Cline. I gave it a C+. Not as great as Ready Player One, but was still a great nostalgic read. Then I read We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I gave this a C+. It was a basic intro to feminism, but I didn't agree with all of her points, and honestly I prefer her other book, Dear Ijuele, a lot better than this one. Then I read Map of Fates by Maggie Hall. This is book 2 in her Conspiracy of Us series, and I gave it a B-. It's cheesy again, but I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it so much that I just continued straight into the next book, which is also the last, and it's called The Ends of the World, and I thought this was just a great, fun, yet cheesy series. Penultimately, I read 7 Brief Lessons on Physics by Carlo Rovelli. I gave it a B-. I thought this was a good introduction to physics, but it made me want more information, which I guess is the point. I wanted to get you into the topic of physics without bombarding you with too much information. Lastly, I read Life, the Universe, and Everything by Douglas Adams. This is his 3rd book in his Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. I gave it a C+. It's still witty and kind of funny, but it was kind of hard to picture what was going on, and it was just a little bit confusing, though that might be because I read the first 2 books like in the beginning of the year. But anyway, those are all of the books I read in 2018. I was about to say 2016. But yeah, those are all the books I read in 2018. I ended up reading 86 books this year, which I was pretty proud about because I only intended to read 50 because I was starting school again, but I nearly doubled it. Hopefully I can get to 100 at some point in my life, but I'm pretty proud with that number. If you guys have read any of these books, please let me know your thoughts on them, and if you want any reviews, because I know I didn't really go into too much depth about any of these books, please let me know, and I will gladly make a review about them. But I will be talking about my 5 top books that I read in 2018 and the top 5 worst books I read in 2018 in the next couple of videos that I post, so you'll get a little bit more explanation and description in those videos. But anyway, if there are any videos or any books that you want videos on, just let me know down below and I will make it a priority to discuss my thoughts on those books at some point. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.